Let's get started. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the conference so far. I hear it's been super busy. It's the first time everyone is back, so I'm really honored to be asked to come here and share some leadership lessons I've learned over the years. So a little bit about me, and it is important we start with the little me, because I grew up as a quiet, only child in an East Asian immigrant family. I got really, really good grades. Yes, I fit the stereotype. But if there was an award for the least likely to be a leader and in marketing, which is my profession, I would probably win that. So fast forward to my adult life. My professional life, I've spent about a third of my career at McKinsey as a management consultant and about 2/3 at Microsoft. I've always been in marketing, but I've done the full tour of duty from product planning, which actually has a really close affinity to user research. I work with them a whole lot on consumer products, all the way to product marketing, which I like to describe as we're kind of the business owners for a particular set of products on the enterprise commercial software space. And so I've done everything from running very mature businesses like Microsoft Project, Visio, maybe some of you use that for visual diagramming, and Dynamics 365 CRM. Also to just growing startups. Yes, there are new startups within Microsoft. Microsoft Viva, it was an employee experience platform, and Copilot for Sales, one of our many AI products that just came to market. So a few years ago, I was awarded the Pinnacle Award at Microsoft. We joke that it's kind of the red jacket because that's what you get, and you get a award, a handshaking from Satya. So out of about 200,000 employees at the company, about 30 people get that every year. And I was very fortunate that year for both the business impact, and I think also why I was nominated was for the people and cultural impact I was having. People really do like working with me and being on my team. I liken it to once early in my career, I had a partner as a management consultant that I would have followed her to any company, but she lived in the Bay Area. Because I learned so much from her. She was, obviously a very competent, capable person, but she also really pushed me to be better and better. And she did it in a kind and caring and supportive way, and I've just always wanted to be her in my career. So to get from that little girl you saw to here, I really had to figure out the tool sets and mindsets to lead effectively. I had to figure out the goods because I wasn't the naturally charismatic, extroverted leader. No offense if you're an extrovert, we love you, because if the world would be very boring if it was just full of introverts. But I had to learn a lot. Microsoft obviously offers a lot of training, but also it was just a really fascinating area for me to learn about leadership and management, so I read books. But I think most importantly, I really learned by examples. Examples of how other amazing leaders that I've been fortunate to work with and observed. Like I really love listening to podcasts on the weekend from chief executives because there's always little nuggets that I can take and apply it in my own small way. So why I want to do this talk was hopefully to, if you're in the camp of never having thought of yourself as a leader, that it would inspire you that anybody can. And if you are a very seasoned leader, that you pick up a tip or two, something new, tool set that you try. Because after all, we're all just students and learning to be better and better in our craft. So there are a lot of leadership principles, frameworks out there. The one I am familiar with is the Microsoft leadership principles. Our senior leadership team spent about a year with the Neuro Leadership Institute, and they distilled from something like 100+ leadership competencies down to just 3 main ideas: create clarity, generate energy, and deliver success. They have lived with the company since the early 2000s, when I think our stock price was about $23 to today. I think last I checked, we're at 407. So something about it works. And you might also ask, do these still apply in the age of AI when everything is moving so fast? We're just entering a new world of possibilities and unknowns. I think yes, and I think it's a yes and. We've also recently embraced adaptive leadership, which really is just a mindset of experimentation. Trying new things methodically, figure out what works, and then take those learnings to inform what you try next. So I'm going to share my lessons learned inspired by these principles and also with the adaptive leadership literature. So it's 10. It's always a nice round number. 6 of them, I'd say, are kind of tool sets that are organized by the 3 leadership principles I just shared. And then there are just 4 mindsets that I found to be helpful. And a lot of it, you recognize it's very similar to the adaptive leadership work. All right, let's get started. So the first area is around creating clarity. That's all about synthesizing the complex, ensuring shared understanding, and defining a course of action to make sure everybody's on the same page and move in the same direction. Now, the speed of AI, we like to joke, wow, we're just working at the speed of AI. With everything moving so fast, organizations are just creating new products, new experiences, campaigns at an ever faster pace. And so your team's plate is getting bigger and bigger. Your teams stretch out thin, they burn out. And of course, plans change frequently, right, in the age of AI. And so, your teams are having a hard time staying in sync with other teams. But I think clarity and getting teams to have that clarity is possible. I think I found that the key is just having simple, effective systems. So here's 2 that I found that works for me and my team. First, OKRs, objectives and key results. Objectives stand for the aspirational goals that you want your teams to achieve. Key results are the measurable drivers that would move you toward that objective. And actions or initiatives are kind of like projects that would move you in the direction of meeting those key results or those KPIs. So the beauty of this is you have a limited number of objectives and key results. I think the best practice is something like, about 5 objectives and something like, 5 to 7 key results under each. So that means there are a lot of things that don't make that OKR list. We actually lovingly call that the no OKRs, and actually being clear about those no OKRs, what didn't make the cut line, is super clarifying. Because, when you say everything's important, then, there's no priorities, right? It works great as both a top-down and bottoms-up approach. So as a leader, you can kind of draft the first draft of your OKRs, kind of really downloading your top-line priorities. But you invite your team from a bottoms-up perspective to discuss and debate, what's the cut line, on the KRs. And each KR is measurable. So I often work with my team to jointly define, gosh, what's a quantitative value that, we collectively feel like it's achievable, but is stretched and aspirational. And where your key results depend on other teams, I actually kind of just spell that out because that's really good for our transparencies. And then these OKRs just become what guides your team priorities, how they spend time, how you allocate budget regularly. They get reset about quarter, so you can kind of keep up to speed with that agility. And we also like to communicate that broadly. We kind of do like OKR newsletters because, again, that really is important to help stay in sync with other teams so they know what is important for your team. One other thing I love is that OKRs don't always have to be about business results. My peers and I often have an objective about team health. So things like, making sure that everybody has a career conversation and has taken their vacation, for example, those actually become KRs under that objective. Research has shown that when people use the OKR framework, 96% of them understand how their work ladders up to the company priorities, which is super important for employee engagement. And, and I find that the beauty of it is that it is pretty simple, and I think you need something simple to make it sustainable. If it's overly complex, people just won't do it. So the next one I like to get into is what I call kind of getting into an operating tempo. So it's kind of like, hey, having semi-annual, kind of strategic planning, having, quarterly OKR resets, and having those monthly or weekly rhythms to engage, to see how you're trending toward those KPIs, to understand the drivers, and really to make decisions and adjust to course correct. The important part of it is just creating time and space so you really understand the drivers toward those KPIs and space to co-create solutions on those important initiatives that you put on the OKRs. So you might say, hey, is this just about setting up a calendar, meeting series, and figuring out the who, what, and when? Yes, it is at the core. But I recently read the James Clear book, Atomic Habits. Yes, probably a lot of you have read it too. One thing that always stuck with me is what he said, that you don't rise to the level of your goals, the OKRs. You fall to the level of your systems, which is the operating tempo. When you don't have systems, it is just random motions and by sheer luck that you get to meet your KPIs. Obviously, the rhythm is highly dependent on your organizational and functional context, but a few tips that I've observed that works really well, this notion of embracing messy meetings, problem solving, co-creating versus kind of, really button up, rehearsed presentations. Another tip, really focus on the learning of the drivers and versus sort of reams of data and reporting out. Also, this is, moms and apple pie, but people don't do this enough, that, hey, you can embrace a variety of communication channels, right? Not everything requires a meetings. Your Teams or Slack chat, incredibly useful for, getting some quick asynchronous collaboration going. One other thing, which is kind of what I invented, but it's not that complicated. I do this kind of priorities on a page with my team members every week. It's kind of inspired by the backlog idea that I work with my leads who then work with their individual contributors, so that it's every week we're aligned on what are the top 3 things you're spending the most of your time on. And everything else goes on your backlog list. Because the top 3 are the most important things that probably align to your KRs. And those I also lovingly call it, those are like, you're getting graded on it. Those are the things you must get an A on. Versus on your backlog, which is, okay, well, it's pass-fail. If you get to it, it's great. And it's, kind of just sequence for later. I just find that is, just really important to a really useful mechanism for everybody to stay in sync. All right, now on to the next area. Good thing I'm by the podium. I can advance my slide this way. So the next area is generating energy. That's inspiring that optimism, creativity, growth, creating a place where everybody feels like they can do their best work, and really just building a culture and organization that's better tomorrow than today. Employee burnout, that still continues to be a major, major issue. And employee engagement, if you look at the Gallup poll, it always is, ridiculously low. It's kind of amazing. And, leaders like ourselves actually are at the highest risk of burnout and disengagement, because we're often sandwiched between executives, right? The many chains that you report into. At the same time, you're also trying to do what you can to support your team. And so it's really important then, first of all, to manage your own time. This is really about managing your energy and effectiveness. It's the simple thing that you're thinking about where are the places that you uniquely can add the most value and that are important. And so a few ways to think about it that I've observed other successful, effective leaders to do. One is kind of think about the dimension between external and internal. So external meaning how much time you spend with customers or at events or just other external facing relationships. It can be just with folks outside of your team, right? Building that relationships in other functions. Versus internal, how much time you spend running the show, running the rhythms, guiding and coaching the team. That's one dimension. Another dimension that's helpful to think about, to be conscious about, is team time versus your individual contributor time. So team time as a people leader, you're spending time guiding, coaching, developing people. But inevitably, there's going to be some really critical strategic projects that only you can do, or sometimes you just got to cover gaps on your teams, right? So just being intentional about your team time versus your individual contributor time. And of course, amongst all of this, make sure you carve out some time for relationships, internal or external to your company. You obviously are all here and understand, gosh, social capital is super important. Make sure there's time for your own learning and growth because that recharges you. And so once you kind of set that allocation, try to stick to it, like color code things and every now and then take a look to see if you are sticking to it. One of my favorite bosses once said, time management is executive management. So this is just critical and becomes even more critical as you grow in your career. Then for your teams, I've got two kind of tools I use, team ethos and team agreement. Team ethos is really a list of shared values and commitments you agree to as a team. So in the organization that I worked in, we have 5 kind of categories of values: purpose, accountability, integrity, balance, respect. And so we'll make commitments like for respect, like, hey, we commit to listen first before we speak. They're really just kind of they represent the DNAs of who you want to be as a team. And then the team agreements are kind of like the rules of the road for how you work together. And I think in this hybrid work world and really globally distributed teams, it's super important to have alignment on how you work around when you're available, communication norms, how you run meetings, how you collaborate effectively, and again, most importantly, how you ensure each other's well-being. Again, it works really well as a tops-down and bottoms-up. We inherit sort of some shared values and some shared team agreements as an organization. And then with my team, we can do the bottoms-up, unique to our own characteristic or just, who we want to be as an identity, as a team. We might add, modify or add additional team ethos or team agreements. So some of the favorite things that my team have come up with, we committed to kind of working as a team to low balance to help each other. So it means that, there are going to be times when each of you steps out of your swim lane to take on a different kind of project because that is just the business necessity, and that's the best way to divide and conquer. Also means that sometimes someone else might do a project that seems like it's in your swim lane, but we agree to divide and conquer as a team. Another one, we committed to actively expressing gratitude and giving credit where credit is due. Again, sounds mom and apple pie, but I don't feel like we do that enough in the corporate world. So as a manager, for example, I really do take the time to thank people for their specific, unique contributions, sometimes in email, sometimes in newsletters, sometimes in passings, because I think it helps for people to know that they are recognized for something specific, other than the general thank yous. Another couple of my favorite agreements, we agree to starting meetings 25 minutes on the 5 after. So together, mix up that half hour, but you get that 5-minute in between. You know what? When we're in remote work, meetings can just run all day, and you're just like, when am I going to get to run to the bathroom or go to the kitchen? We also have this virtual water cooler chat. It's just a simple Teams chat, but it's been going on for like several years now. It's almost like a historian copy of what is going on with the team, because that's where we'll just share like, hey, I might share what just came out of the staff meeting, things you should know. People use that to ask each other for help and say, hey, have you seen that file? Or you know what, even just share vacation photos, things you might do when you bump into each other in a water cooler. So that's something I really treasure, and sometimes I look back to remember what the years were like. Culture often sounds so squishy, but I really do think that it is just the sum of how you work. So when you write it down and revisit it regularly, you can actually shape it. All right, third pillar is delivering success. This one that's pretty self-explanatory is having you working on meeting those targets of the KPIs, right? Meeting those OKRs. But I also think it's about contributing to the top line of your organization. This leads me to my next tip, which is I call it knowing your business. Obviously, each of us should know our discipline, function really well. But I also think it's important to know the macro level. By that, I mean, I think it's every leader's job to understand trends, customer, competition, and encouraging your team to do the same so you can harness that collective bring trust. I also think the macro is like understanding a bit about the business strategy. How does your company make money? What are the top products or solutions that contribute to that? Who are your target customers? Bigger customers, smaller customers, in particular segments, geography, and hey, what are those channel strategies to get those target customers to spend money? Big difference from relying on enterprise Salesforce solution selling to kind of web direct. Understanding that makes a difference, I think, in every function and how they make decisions. As product marketing, I actually still do get to work pretty closely with my design colleagues and with my product managers. So just a couple quick places, right, of why that even matters. Once we had our design team was trying to figure out, logos for a variety of Copilot products. And once they understood sort of which kind of pair of products sort of went together as a solution, because that's just how our Salesforce will talk about it, that influenced them to kind of design icons and for those two products in kind of similar styles, so you can kind of get that extra connectivity tissue to it. Another one, in the software world, there's a lot of freemium strategies. So I know that for those products, when my design team understood, gosh, what are the free features? Which are the premium ones? And where do we think are like almost the golden use case to jump from free to premium? That helps them design sort of in-product, notifications and indications to encourage people to discover those premium products premium features once they've been using the free features. And one more tip here is being rational. Again, I know that sounds so common and basic, but I really do think that good old problem-solving techniques really benefit making decisions, even creative ones. So the good old toolkit of defining the problem statement clearly, and gosh, like what's the metric to define success? What's in or out of scope for the solution space you can use to address the problem? Structuring the problem, sometimes it's a really big problem, so you got to break it down to smaller sub-problems. In management consulting speak, we call it the issue tree. And so you can prioritize it, right? Some issues you just know at a t-shirt sizing level, it's gonna make a bigger difference to solving that problem. So you don't spend all the time boiling the ocean. Developing the hypotheses, collecting and analyzing the data, and synthesizing those insights to develop your answer. And I think most importantly in this adaptive mindset world is the executing, learning, and iterating. Another tangential bit I'll add to decision making is I encourage you to involve more of your team in problem solving and decision making. I'm starting to get to middle age, and so there's this whole saying that your crystallized intelligence, just the patterns you've gotten a chance to see over the years, hones your judgment, and that often is what contributes a lot to good decision making. And so when you involve your team in how you reason through options, data, and apply judgment and lessons from before, obviously you should always do that because that invites diversity of perspective. Make sure I'm not missing some blind spots. But it also is your way to train the next generation. And it helps you because when your team members understand how you make decisions, you can be confident in delegating that decision making as much to the individual level as possible. And in this age of speed and agility, like just delegation and empowerment to the front line as much as possible is critical. All right, now I'm gonna share just 4 mindsets that I found helpful. First, strive for raising the bar. This is really all about the growth mindset, that there's always something more to learn. And whether that is getting deeper and better at your discipline, knowing the latest techniques in it, or understanding your customer needs and habits at a much more granular level, or just being aware of your competition or the adjacent spaces to spark new ideas. It's really important to do that. And I think that when you model this growth mindset, and demonstrate yourselves that gosh, here's something new I learned, and this is why I changed the decision I made earlier. When you actively model that growth mindset, it makes it safe to learn, and I think that this striving the bar seems more a motivator than what it might sound like a stressor. Because I think that as human beings, I think there's an innate satisfaction for being able to do something better than you were able to do before. And learning new things, it keeps your mind sharp. And also, I know statistically that recently I read a study that staying curious and being open to new ideas and experiences are actually the key to living a longer, healthier, and happier life. Now the next one. Leaders, I like to say everyone is a leader, so even if you're an individual contributor. But if you happen to really be a people leader as well, a people manager, take that responsibility seriously. Study after study have shown that managers have a disproportionate impact, outsized impact, on employee engagement, satisfaction. It's good for business and good for people when you get to retain your talent and, motivate them to go above and beyond, right? And so being a great manager kind of is having those 3 mindsets of having a coaching mindset. You are here to support your team to thrive. You are also here to challenge them to be better than they were able to do before. Modeling mindset, living the values or the team ethos that you have all committed to, right, as an example. Walking the walk instead of just talking the talk, and so your team will follow. And also just having a caring mindset, Take the time to get to know your team members, understand their capabilities and their motivations and their aspirations. And yeah, caring actually sometimes involves giving really honest feedback, but in a kind way, to help them adapt and learn and grow. For me, I just kind of think about if it's good for business and it happens to be good for people too, why not? So getting down to the second to the last one, this one is about leading with who you are. It goes without saying that we're all different individuals. We all have different strengths, different personality traits, different experiences, different backgrounds. And even though it's 2024, people still associate leaders with some stereotypical traits, right? Just kind of having that gravitas, executive presence, you hear those labels. I don't know about you, but for me, if I try to act differently for too long, it just really depletes my energy. But I think the good news is that study have shown that employees actually want authenticity in their leaders. And so when you lead from who you are, from your strengths, you're not only saving yourself energy, but also you're going to be more effective. And so use tools like the Gallup Strength Finder, there's plenty of those, or 360 feedback to really kind of get to understand what your strengths are. And again, just a quick story about me. If you remember the little child on screen at the beginning, I'm brought up as an introvert and really not prone to just speaking up. I'm actually trained as an engineer in a marketing profession, and it's really hard for me to toot my own horn. It's much easier for me to toot my other team members' horns. And so early in career, I got a lot of feedback about just, speaking up and being louder. I tried that for a while, but that just wasn't sustainable. And at some point, I kind of learned to reframe what are perceived weaknesses, if you will, as actually kind of superpowers. Because the introvert in me, I naturally listen first. So I'm there listening to different options, asking for different pros and cons and data. So I make sure my leadership style actually just makes sure everything gets serviced to the table. Being an engineer, that helps me reason through being kind of logical, even in helping the team make creative decisions, and what the tagline should be for our product. Because I think there's always surveys, there's always just even qualitative pros and cons and sentiments you can weigh against. And I think just helping people, like my natural tendency to my team members' horns, that helps them be more successful and go the extra mile. So actually, all in all, it turns out to be actually just works for me. So I'll just encourage you to figure out who you are and lead from that. And I'm getting to my very last one. And I know this one gets a little squishy, but it works for me and a lot of other kind of senior executives I see. A lot of executives talk about purpose. And I think it's just about finding what drives you to get out of bed, recharges you, besides paycheck. Yes, we all need to work to pay the bills. And so it can be business purpose. It can be people purpose. For me, I think about who my team needs me to be on different days, and that really gives me motivation to keep going. It excites me to drive business, to take a business that I'm a steward of and try to make it, beat the KPIs and beat the revenue target from the year before. It gives me great joy to make my team the best place that my team has ever worked on. And a little bit shaped by my faith too, that if my actions get to help somebody, my team member, a colleague in a day, that fills my joy bucket. So I just encourage you to think about what that is for you that will keep you going on those tough days. So that wraps up my 10 tips. I think that I have another 10 minutes or so to stick behind to take any questions that you guys might have. And definitely, this has just become my passion area to learn, to figure out how to become better and more effective leaders. So please find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to continue the dialogue. Thank you so much. I guess we open the floor.
Yeah, I just had a quick question so those 10 tips is kind of like your baseline plan. Do you have some examples of where you had team members that maybe responded as you kind of tuned things up or down within your framework?
Yeah, one example comes to mind. So actually, it's about a year ago, I was asked to take on a new team, which had a really different culture, let's put it that way. And there were, people weren't feeling great, there were all kinds of issues, so they were like, Angela, can you move from this amazing team? I had to leave this amazing team I had and take on this other team. So I would say it was really interesting learning for me because when I brought over what I thought were some best practices, right? You know, it made me realize, oh, okay, well, not everyone sees it as a best practice right away, because we're just all ingrained to how we do things, their habits, right? So, in that example, I did kind of ask my new team to take a leap of faith with me. One thing that was really hard for them was they came from a culture of, just having really, I just call it like lack of collaboration. Like everybody felt like, okay, I need to have my strict swim lane. That's what I'm known for. That's what I'm going to be evaluated on. And what I asked them to take a leap of faith on, it's like, hey, messiness and collaboration, like engaging with your peers and early problem solving, not always worrying about that you have to be the person that came up with the best idea. That's actually going to be a better solution for the project you're working on. And guess what? You're going to be recognized for the success of the project, not necessarily, hey, did I do 100% of it? Did I come up with every good idea in there? Did I have complete control? Right, I did have to take them on a leap of faith. People did tell me, hey, that feels a little uncomfortable. And I just told them, hey, just, try it out for a couple months. And then let's have a talk. And I did have team members now coming back. It's like, wow, okay, like I really like this new way of working. But it's an example of like, and I think I will continue to learn what better ways to do it right. But yeah, it's a lesson of like change management definitely takes time. So.
Hi.
Hi.
So often in design, there's like you're in a room full of really strong opinions. How do you manage like a room full of people like with really strong opinions in a meeting?
Yeah. There are some things that come to mind. Yeah, I think structuring your agenda and having some norms of how to interact in the meeting interactions would be useful. And right, like you would do different things for different groups of personalities. If it was very loud and strong, like I might, what comes to mind, it's like, hey, just having some rules of the road that, for example, I might literally go around the room. Like I don't usually do it, but it's like I might literally go around the room to make sure every opinion is expressed instead of just the loudest one. I might literally set the agenda where, gosh, it's 1 minute per person, making it up, right? So it kind of gives me the right to be like, all right, like time's up, we got to move on. I also think with loud personalities, like sometimes it's helpful to, I think you just have to structure more time because I think that people just want to get their ideas out there. And once they feel like they're heard, it's almost like structuring a listening time, and then you can kind of move on to, all right, now problem solving. Like we've heard all of these, what are some structure criteria, principles we can all agree with to evaluate all those great ideas that were heard. Yeah, so I think things like that hurt. And last one, I know you didn't ask this, but as an introvert, what I like to share is like, I often have trouble like kind of getting in on those big meetings where there are a lot of loud opinions, right? So this is kind of back to like embracing different kinds of communications. I learned this from another CVP who's also an introvert, and he said that, he just makes sure that, he expresses his opinions in a methodical way, afterwards in an email. Like it doesn't have to happen in the meetings. Like there are other ways to express your opinions and make sure you're heard, especially when, you're quieter. Oh, there's one up.
So
Oh, yep.
I'm a new UX design leader, and I often struggle to find the line between when can I help my team through design feedback to make the product better versus letting them iterate and learn. So do you have any tips for people like me?
Yeah, something comes to mind. I was actually at a Blink event a month ago, and a colleague at Oracle, he runs the design organization. He had said that. So I'm just going to paraphrase a bit of what he said. He observed that young, early in career design folks, like I think this applies to all early career folks, tend to feel like, gosh, I want to stay in my lane. I'm not sure if I'm like being, I feel like I should mind my own business. And he observes that actually, early in career people should almost over rotate a bit in feeling a stronger sense of ownership. Yes, you might be responsible for designing this part, but you're all contributing to the overall success of the experience of which your feature is a part, right? So you have every right to express ideas and opinions that would help the broader product and solution. And you can always do it in a way, it's like, hey, I just got an idea, I just want to share, feel free to ignore. You can add you can do it in style that doesn't sound like you're, trying to take over everyone else's job. So, I don't know your situation especially well, but I'm going to venture a guess that feeling like you have more of a sense of ownership and, erring on the side of expressing your opinions more, probably, yeah, would be in the right direction.
First of all, thanks.
Hi.
It's been great. Awesome tips. I wonder if you've ever found yourself in a situation where you take all of these great leadership techniques and you find yourself in a vacuum where you're the only one doing things this way. Maybe it's your peers horizontally across the organization are not effectively using these tools, or even your superiors and your senior leaders are not effectively using these techniques.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to a leader who could lead horizontally or upward in the organization?
Yeah. I think that definitely, to your point, there are going to be more conducive environments, friendly environments, friendly kind of global corporate environments. And it is more effective when kind of everyone, right, sort of embraces things this way. But, we live in the real world. Works nothing like that. Even in my own little world, it doesn't. In the example, when I said I was asked to go over to a new organization about a year ago, the macro culture was very different. But I think this is the old adage of focus on what you can control. I still apply, kind of what I know to work and continue to work on in my own little sphere. I recognize when I can't impact those outside me, and I have to learn to kind of let go, just focus on like it is what it is. I'm going to focus on what I can, the team culture that I can make better. And I still believe, and I did see it too, that once you kind of demonstrate that these tips, these ways of running the team works, and your team members become more effective and better collaborators with other teams, and that shows up in staff meeting as well, then actually that gets that's a great entry point to influence the other peer team to start embracing some of these habits. But yeah, it's not a perfect world, but I do believe that everyone has some sphere that is within their control, and that's what we should focus on.
So I really appreciated how you brought up authenticity, and despite I'm pretty early in my career, but it does feel like that's been more of a recent push that people can be their authentic selves within a workforce. So like thinking of that trend in the recent years, I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on future trends for leaders in the next couple of years?
Yeah. There's a lot of continuing trends, I think, like, how to authenticity, continuing to like how to really embrace D&I and like really make that part of the DNA. Hybrid work, that continues to be an ever challenge of navigating what's the right balance. So there are definitely things I feel like that will continue to be like future, what do you call it, trends or top of mind challenges and opportunities for leaders. I think that the new one, and I'll just underscore it, is it's the whole just dealing with this pace of change and magnitude of change. Meaning, yes, ever since we're in the digital world, things did move very fast already. But I think in this age of AI, it's just gone to warp speed. Like I'm going from like, quarter to planning a launch down to a month. And the last one, I had to do it in 2 weeks. So you're just really adjusting to that speed. And also just the unknowns. I think it's, just the elephant in the room that AI is going to change all of our jobs. I'm not saying they're going to take our jobs, but how marketers do their job is starting to change, and it's going to keep changing. And I'm sure that's just true for every white-collar worker. So for leaders, gosh, like helping, how do I change myself first, right? Embrace that. How do then I help my team, the reskilling, the inevitable change management. And I think having, kind of putting our minds together to then put together a new vision for what your team or function is with, AI supporting you, right? So I think that's just a new unknown for leaders, and I think we're going to be wrestling with that for a little bit.
Thank you so much. I'm curious if you've ever encountered this, or if you might have recommendations for teams that have a sense of like false harmony. Like there's this quiet agreement, and sometimes that challenge, that debate can be really meaningful to getting towards, the right or the best solutions. Have you ever encountered that, or how have you encouraged, I guess, debate on teams?
Yeah. I think modeling first yourself, it's a great way to go. I often intentionally kind of talk about, like places I have changed my mind because I learned some new information, so I changed my mind. Here's why. Or hey, like looking back last week, this is what I learned in my customer meeting. Like I did X, Y, Z, didn't work so well, so now I'm gonna try ABC. I do try to, it's useful for my own learning, but I do try to articulate that because I'm hoping that that's a way of saying, hey, I can do that for myself, it is safe. So the next time, and as needed, I think that's part of being a leader. Part of caring is about giving honest feedback. So when something's not going right, I'm going to say it, and hopefully because you've seen, I kind of say that to myself, I say it in the most loving and kind way to you to help you and the collective team be successful. So I think I encourage modeling. It is a hard one. It's funny. You either get the ends of the spectrum, really loud people, and then people who are just overly nice for the sake of social harmony. So I think it is a leader to calibrate and to model like what the right mix should be. I think we have one more, and then I think we might be over time, on to the next session.
Thank you. So you're establishing a culture within your team, etc. How do you manage where that culture may not be shared with the partners that you're working with, and there's a kind of like a little bit of rubbing up between the culture you've established and then maybe a culture coming from externally?
Yeah, that's an even tougher one. And I feel like at Microsoft, it's like, oh yeah, we went through a lot of training, like all the way from like, gosh, like even just, I don't think that's what you're asking about, but like business conduct, right? Like, how you operate might be different than your partner organization. And I think that some of the things that, I think that at the end of the day, still goes back to recognizing what you can control, and there's just some things you can't, right? If your partner organizations who's so important to your company just has a different DNA, like I think it's important to recognize that, okay, like don't beat your head against a wall. Like, try to model the best behavior, but you know what? Some things might still be the way they are. I do think I can think of a couple of things where as leader, where some courage is needed, because there are going to be times when things just cross the line, right? Like, let's say like teams from your partner organization is yelling at your own team, right? Like there's some times when you're like, okay, as a leader, I gotta say something to say, hey, like, I don't think that's all right. Like, I think there's a better way of working together. Let's do this. And I think I've also learned over time that sometimes we all want to be independent and handle things ourselves, but there are going to be bigger issues sometimes, let's say with a partner organization, that, you know what, I need a bigger title support. So sometimes often actually, I punch it up. And I try to punch it up quick, because I think sometimes we tend to do too much on our own, and we forget that, you know what, that's what your bosses and your bosses' bosses are there for, to handle these really tricky situations. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again for attending. Thank you those online. Would love to connect with you. Thank you again. Have a great rest of the conference.